Hello Cloud Gurus and welcome to the S3 section of the course. In this lecture we're going to explore S3 Essentials and specifically just around S3 itself as well as Glacier. We'll then go on in further lectures to do some more practical elements and then we'll explore CloudFront. So let's get started with S3 and what S3 is. S3 provides developers and IT teams with secure, durable, highly scalable object storage. Amazon S3 is easy to use with a simple web services interface to store and retrieve any amount of data from anywhere on the web. S3 is object-based, i.e. it allows you to upload and store files on the platform. Files can be from 1 byte to 5 terabytes in size. There's unlimited storage, and files are stored in things called buckets. Think of a bucket as a directory, like you would have on any Windows or Linux file system. The only difference between a directory and a bucket is that buckets have a unique namespace for each given region. So for example, if I wanted to create a bucket called A Cloud Guru in the EU West region, that namespace would then be reserved. So somebody else using another Amazon account could not go in and create an A Cloud Guru bucket. With S3, Amazon guarantees 99.99% availability for the S3 platform. S3 buckets essentially are spread across availability zones. So if an availability zone goes down, you don't have to worry, your S3 bucket is stored in the other availability zones. And Amazon do this automatically on a region basis. You don't have to worry about configuring this. Amazon also guarantees 99.9999999% durability for S3 information. The way I remember that is I just like to think of 11 nines. So they give you 11 nines durability. And so what is durability? Durability is simply if you think of storing a file on a disk set that's a RAID 1 and you lose one of the disks. Because you're in a RAID 1 configuration, which is a mirror, all your information is stored across 2 disks, so you can afford the loss of one disk. Now the way Amazon structure S3 is that if you store 10,000 files, they'll guarantee those 10,000 files will stay there with a 99.9999999% durability. S3 can have metadata or key value pairs on each file. S3 allows you to do lifecycle management as well as versioning, and we'll come to that in a practical example in a later lecture as to what lifecycle management is and what versioning is. S3 also allows you to encrypt your buckets, so you can store your files encrypted at rest. So there's a few different storage types for S3. We've got our standard S3 storage, which gives you 99.99% availability and the 11 nines durability. We then have a thing called reduced redundancy storage. So we still have a 99.99% availability and your buckets are replicated across different availability zones automatically, but they use different disk sets, so they'll only give you 99.99% durability over a given year. So basically it's a little bit cheaper to use reduced redundancy storage, but you only want to store files on there that are not important if you lose them. So only use reduced redundancy storage for replaceable data. For example, if you have 10,000 files, you could expect to lose 100 files over 1 year as opposed to 0.00001 file with the standard S3 durability. Okay, so let's move on to Glacier. What is Glacier? Glacier is an extremely low-cost storage service for data archival. Amazon Glacier stores data for as little as 1 cent per gig per month and is optimized for data that is infrequently accessed, for which retrieval times of 3 to 5 hours are suitable. So Glacier is effectively data archiving. So in traditional organizations you might archive off to tape, and you might do this because you, in the UK for example, companies that are regulated by the Financial Services Authority have to store their data for 7 years. Now you want to archive this off to tape and put the tapes away into a safe location and then forget about them, and then 7 years later you can then destroy the data. So Amazon gives us this data archival as a service. We can do away with tapes entirely, and we can archive anything that's in our S3 buckets directly to Glacier. So if we have a look at the way Amazon do their pricing, there's 3 different storage types. So we've got our standard storage for S3, we've got our reduced redundancy storage, and then we've got our Glacier storage. And this is just the US standard pricing from that US standard region. And if you're in a different region, you can go to their pricing website and just drop down that drop-down box and change it to the region that you're based in. As a solutions architect, you'll need to help your business or customer evaluate which product is best for them. For example, if we have 10,000 files taking up exactly 1 terabyte, this would cost you $30.72 with reduced redundancy storage. On S3. With reduced redundancy storage, however, it would cost you $24.58. So you're going to save yourself $6.14 a month, but on average you would lose around 100 files a year based on the reduced durability standards. So what you have to then ask yourself, is this a risk the business is prepared to risk for the sake of $6 per month? And only the business can tell you that. It's not something that you would necessarily know off the top of your head, but you have to go to them and give them the options and ask the questions. Let's move on to S3 versioning. What is S3 versioning? Basically, it stores all versions of an object, including writes, and even if you delete an object. So you might have a Word file that says hello in it, and you've saved it to your S3 bucket. You might then go in and update that Word file and say hello world. You would then have 2 versions of that file on your S3 bucket, the one with hello and the one with hello world. It's a great backup tool, and once enabled, versioning cannot be disabled, only suspended, so that's quite important to note. Let's move on to S3 lifecycle management. Lifecycle management can be used in conjunction with versioning, and it can be applied to current versions and previous versions. Following actions are allowed in conjunction with or without versioning: archive only, permanently delete only, archive and then permanently delete. And don't worry if this doesn't mean much to you right now, you'll see it in the practical lecture. These are basically just options for your S3 lifecycle management as to what you want to do. So let's move on to encryption. With S3, you can upload or download your data to S3 via SSL encrypted endpoints, and S3 can also automatically encrypt your data at rest. So this means when you're transmitting your data as well as when you're storing your data, you can ensure that it's encrypted so that nobody can access it. S3 gives you the choice of managing your keys through the AWS Key Management Service, or having Amazon S3 manage them for you, or you can provide your own keys. Let's talk a little bit about S3 security. So all buckets are private by default. That means that if you were to type in the bucket's publicly accessible URL address and it's not a publicly available bucket, you wouldn't be able to access objects within that bucket. You have to actually go in and make that bucket public, and we'll go through that in one of the next lectures. It also allows access control lists, and it actually gives you very fine grain access. So you can set so that only an individual user can access only one individual bucket, and perhaps they only have read access to that bucket. So you might have your finance might have a bucket that contains all your financial records that your finance department are accessing, and then maybe someone in payroll needs to go in and view people's pay, but you only want to give them read-only access. But anyone else working in finance, say an administrator, you don't want to give them access to what people are being paid. You only want the payroll department to be allowed to do that. So you can set all these fine-grained permissions on your S3 buckets. S3 also integrates with identity access management using roles. For example, allows EC2 users to have access to S3 buckets by roles. And we went through that in the last section, and when we do the EC2 section, we'll be able to see that from the EC2 side. And all endpoints are encrypted by SSL. Let's talk a little bit about S3 functionality. Static websites can be hosted on S3. You don't need to set up any web servers. You can just upload a static.html file to an S3 bucket and take advantage of AWS's S3 durability and high availability. Now, a lot of people do this in real life, where if they've going to launch an event, they might upload, and they expect that event to get a lot of hits, they might just upload a static HTML page to S3 and use that to serve this content out. It can be a great way of doing it because you don't have to worry about web servers, you don't have to worry about traffic management, load balancing, auto scaling, etc. S3 will do all that functionality for you. S3 also integrates with CloudFront, which is Amazon's own content delivery network, and we'll go into that in a bit more detail in the next few lectures. It also allows multi-part uploads, which allows you to upload parts of a file concurrently. And it's suggested that you do this for 100 meg files or over, but it is a requirement if you're uploading any file over 5 gigs. You have to do this through multi-part uploads. It also allows us to resume a stopped file upload. So you can stop a file when it's uploading and then resume it, or if you lose your internet connection, for example, you can resume the file upload and you won't have to start over again. S3 is spread across multiple availability zones, and they guarantee that you'll have eventual consistency, but you just have to remember that sometimes you might upload a file to an S3 bucket and then you go to try and access that file programmatically, and because you're trying to do that so fast, it might not have replicated across to other availability zones. So it's just important to remember that all availability zones will eventually be consistent, and put, write and delete requests will eventually become consistent across availability zones. Let's talk about some S3 use cases. So we can use it for file shares for networks, we can use it for backup and archiving, we can use it as an origin for CloudFront's content distribution network, we can use it to host static files, we can use it to host static websites. And that concludes this lecture. This lecture is of a very high level at this stage, and we'll move on to the next lecture where we start getting our hands dirty. We'll create some S3 buckets, we'll enable versioning control, we'll apply lifecycle management policies, etc. And then we'll move on to CloudFront. So I look forward to working with you in the next lecture.